Good morning. Welcome from the Coalition of a Sustainable Production. We will begin the event. What's the future of the forest and the Peruvian Amazon? The objective of this event is to, in the framework of the new regulations, international regulations, and the commitments, environmental commitments, the Amazon with emphasis on monitoring and traceability and protocol which we invite the regional director government will give some words. Applause for him, please. Good morning, everyone. I want to say hello. We hope to be taking care of some things. From the regional government, we are doing things sustainable. San Martin has 10 provinces, 78 districts, and each one of them we work agriculture. And in this moment, we have a policy of managing so that we can achieve a market of many years. The regional government puts in disposal our platform so that we are considered. We need to work together. A lot of projects exist in this space where it belongs as the Director of Agriculture. We want the platform to be integrated so that it can benefit those who have achieved the market and those who haven't yet. We have been working from the regional government to organize better our producers. Some of them already have a long trajectory, and some of them still have. Of the Association of Coffee, and now I see the private sector that want to support and contribute here so that the producers maintain. We would like from our government to be able to work with all of those that want to help us achieve our goal. We have 3 projects in agriculture and one of cacao, one of coffee, one of plantain and orange. And there, for example, we have different actors. We have excellent, successful examples, but we want to scale up so that more producers in our region can benefit from being successful in this area. We want to Good morning. framework that brings us here. We work in farming and forestry, those that come together to the Amazon. All of these producers in agricultural markets have the European market, but we look with the ministry and different kinds of cooperation. We look to complement these efforts so that we can achieve the goal that we have, but it's not just meet the goals and the topics that we want to cover at a national level, but also a strategy, a development strategy in forestry products that can help these producers. We're not just going to talk about the normative points, but things that we need to do better, improve, but also tools to support and move forward with the productivity. Right now, policy is something that we want it to complement the utility, manipulation of lands, credits. It's a package that's more integrated for the development in Amazon. And this is thanks to the ministry and a lot of contribution from the people that are here that probably will, the idea is to spread what we are working on and how do we complement each other. It's a challenge for Peru, for consumers and countries that buy our products. So it's our responsibility to take care of our forests. We have goals where we want to make sure that we have and produce sustainable products. We have our first goal, help from the government to meet this goal. Right now we have the second goal in the equation, which is deforestation. The government in this terms is coming up with policies so that given in different spaces. About 2 or 3 weeks, I was with the Ministry of Economy and we talked about the progresses and what are we facing and what do we need so we can achieve our goals. Thank you for the organization, and we want to share our achievements. Thank you. We want to welcome Alexander Kaufman from the Netherlands. I want to welcome all of those that are present. Ambassador here in Peru, and I am happy that we are meeting with the directors Jorge Fidel Castro and the Ministry of Environment, Antonio Tarala, from SECOR, Director Fabio Rios, and Martin Augusto Villafuerte, General Manager from Pura Vida, and representatives of the regional government of San Martin, but most importantly, all of you representatives of the supply chains of cacao and coffee, corporation and civil society. I think that as Jorge mentioned, we are doing today is a uh, teamwork, and that's the most important. And the reason that we're all here is just to reinforce the mission that we all have together. And I appreciate that a lot of you have had to travel from far away to be here with us. It is, I'm really happy to welcome you here in San Martin and Tarapoto, where our collaborators have been doing great work to prepare the producers so that they meet and fulfill the new requirements. Last time I had the opportunity to do it in Lima at my home, but I admit that I prefer being here, so thank you. From the Netherlands, we want to reaffirm our commitment to promote value chains that guarantee the protection of the forest and the resources that you find today. We count others have read with who has come from the Netherlands to update us and the latest on the regulations. We hope that this event is a step ahead. So we can say that the region of San Martin meet the regulations. And I say this because of interest. We in the Netherlands, or the citizens of the Netherlands, are the ones that consume the most coffee. We drink about 150 liters of coffee every year, and we would like this to be successful, and we are convinced that it will. I hope that it's a great day, and thank you so much for the space. Advice in Ecuador for the embassy of the Netherlands. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from Bogota, where I live and work, not just in Colombia and Peru. We have a great team also on the embassy with Salvador Orrego, who's also here, and I am very happy to be able to be here with you today for these important topics. And as those who have spoken before me, this is very important for us because really we share interest between Peru and the Netherlands. We are very agriculture and conservation of diversity. And today, because I believe that this day will give us an opportunity to exchange knowledge, get to know each other, and ask each other the questions that are necessary to understand what we are talking about, what is all of this about, and how Peru is moving towards the goal. I am really interested in knowing these advances that are moving forward. And I think the coalition that that is organizing this is, I would say, an organization that's very important with a lot of partners from the private sector, from the government, from civil society, from international cooperation. And I think that coalition gives also the opportunity to exchange all of this knowledge, get together, and move forward. And I think that even within the region in Latin America, that coalition is a very good example of how we can organize all of the actors of the supply chains. And also here in San Martin, I would like to thank you all for having us here. And I hope we have a successful meeting and fruitful one. Thank you.
Counselor, invite you to this event and to greet the region of San Martin for receiving us, and all the authorities, Minagri, and all the organizations of the state and all of the stakeholders of the value chain for a very important event on the application of the free deforestation project. And it speaks about the development sustainability in value chains. The European Union developed this regulation to fight against deforestation. At the same time, for Peru, it is a great opportunity to develop value chains for coffee and that are structured and that produce quality goods. We can stop deforestation related to agriculture. This is a commitment, as the representatives of the Netherlands were saying. This is important for the European operators and as well as for Peruvians. The UE wants to continue importing Peruvian goods under a new legislation that is with all of the products as cocoa, palm oil, and coffee. This is the reason why the European Union, as a group, and Netherlands, and also from the German cooperation, we are working together with the Peruvian authorities and Minagri, also Serfor, Miram, De Vida, Mincetur, with all the stakeholders of the value chain, companies and traders, so the norms can be complied with. We are 4 months into the application of the norms, and that date might happen before we expected, because we will send to Europe in the beginning of October the first products under the new norms. Some of this product will arrive before or in the first months of 2025. So we greet the work of Solidaridad to creating alliances in the value chain. It's because of that that the European Union unites to this initiative as an observer. We hope that this event can be a space to share solutions and good practices that show that it is possible to protect the forest with competitive advantage for the stakeholders in that value chain. Great event to you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have concluded this first part. Strategic allies of the coalition for sustainable development. Now we will begin to I'm Fabiola Munoz. I coordinate the efforts of the Coalition for Sustainable Production, and it is as the name says, a set of stakeholders that, because of their own will, are trying to um, see what we can do to achieve this. And the idea is how we build this idea of a future of an agriculture in the tropical, low emission agriculture that can allow our products to reach the different markets. Some years ago, and we can continue with the next slide, we created a coalition, and today we are 60 organizations, all public and private. Actually, the regional government San Martin, who is represented by the director, sees one of the thinkers of this initiative as well. And we have two things that we would like to highlight as well. The first one is that we are a platform of voluntaries. There's no project behind us. It's not that tomorrow the project ends and the coalition ends. It's actually an articulated effort, collaborative effort. So it also represents a challenge because we need to agree um, among different people from different stakeholders, because governments, we are very participative. The steering committee, we have people from the private sector, public sector, national government, regional government, stakeholders of cooperation, academia, indigenous population. So all of that implies an effort. But what joins us is the will that we believe that we can do things in a different manner. Initiative, we have defined a value proposal in collaborative work. And for that, we believe that no one should be left behind. In the words of the speakers before me, they highlighted the importance of working together. We never have enough resources. The budgets are never enough. The hands are never enough. But if we work uh, with no articulation, we certainly will take longer and we will achieve less. So the regional government has proposed that there are many projects working on the territory, but we are not necessarily articulated. The coalition is an effort of all stakeholders to try to work in an articulated manner, because we believe in that common achievement. The coalition doesn't belong to anyone, but at the same time is everyone's. So that represents challenges, and in those challenges, one of the ones that we have found is the one related with how we face these regulatory changes. And that's where we wonder if Peru is really ready to face that. The first answer is we are not ready. But the second, and most important for me, is that this has allowed us to think and how we work together to be prepared enough. The challenge today is time, because I believe we all in this space and different spaces, we are aware that we need to work together to face these challenges. We have opportunities to achieve that, but we haven't been able to calibrate the details. These spaces search exactly for that dialogue. That is the foundation of our work, to agree on how to progress. So one of the things that I would like to mention is, for example, to highlight the efforts of many of the stakeholders today. We looked at these efforts of GIC, Solidaridad, GIC, Bra Forest, and they're all trying to see how to add to this initiative. But this is a time in which we need to strengthen the capacity for articulation among all of us. One of the main challenges is that the stakeholders do not share information. Even the private sector shares information that they could, or the public sector generates the conditions for trust, so the privates share their information. So, what is happening in that path is something that we need to put on the table. There's no other way of solving that if we do not put things on the table. The spaces are exactly looking to have a frank, open a conversation, transparent conversation. Because if we fail, we all fail. The private sector, but also the state, the country. So it's not time saving our information. It's actually time to share it. We're trying to generate the conditions, so it is like so. And along the same line, one of the things that has appeared with strength is what are the incentives for a series of years? We have seen that there are more perverse incentives because it's more expensive to be a formal actor than to be an informal actor. In our local market, for example, does not make a difference between a product that has an origin that is not linked to deforestation and a product that is. So if we don't have that differentiation that markets abroad have, we are not going to be able to generate incentives. So what we are doing and to prepare and to continue exporting, we would need to think for our local market, because that will help us to search for those higher objectives, which are to stop deforestation, because that signal in the market has that purpose in the end. It is an instrument. But if we do not stop it, tomorrow another instrument will come and another instrument will come, and every time we will have more pressure. So I think it is an important moment so we understand the real reason for that joint effort is not to attend regulations of the European Union. That's why the title is if we are ready for those regulations, but beyond that, because deforestation is something that we need to stop. But one of the things here that we need to identify, which are the incentives. Many of you know me for a long time, know that I have spent a lot of years working for the government, and I always thought that the public sector is the art of providing incentives in the right places. So people go where we want them to go, and to avoid other actions. So that balance that we need to have requires incentives. Today, many speak about an economy of behavior, and we haven't interiorized the economic concepts, that those models of public policies that we must have. And it's not only about resources. There are many incentives or disincentives. There is where we need to focus our efforts to think on what behaviors we want from the stakeholders. What behaviors do we award? In that same line, when we go beyond the European Union's regulation, we have to think on how we recover degraded areas. And there we have options. We have cocoa, we have coffee, we have palm, cattle. The producers, they have several options. What options exist associated that are not monocrops but agroforestry systems? Credits, for example, cheaper if we have a agroforestry system than monocrops. The state is working, and I think Fidel has been very clear on that comprehensive vision. But we need that turns into a reality. Yesterday, I was speaking with Daniel about the financial products that exist. And there is a very good financial product designed for the requirements of the producers, but with a high rate. 35% is not a low rate. 50% is not a low rate. How do we expect a producer to go to technified irrigation with 35% of interest rate? He is not going to do it. So, on the other hand, we have the design of a product with a super low interest rate, 3.5%. But when we ask the producers if that product is designed for them, they say no. How do we reconcile the good design of one with a good rate of the other one? Well, these are the spaces to speak about that. But if we don't do that, frankly, if we don't do that in freedom, we will not achieve that at the speed that we require. So this is exactly how we can put in value the forest, because the forest still competes with other uses. So yes, we are interested in cocoa and coffee and palm and cattle. Yes, 4 lines are progressing, but we are also interested in the forest itself, because if that forest does not generate a value for the producers, tomorrow they will turn it into another activity because it's not generating for that producer. Yes, and the producer has to pay bills as us, and they're not profiting. So the business line is very important. All those services, all those products of the forest are something that we must think, and especially with urgency. And that, only to conclude, wrap up my presentation, this is the most important request that we do from the coalition. This is urgent because the producers, the country, the stakeholders in general cannot wait more for the regulation rules. The deforestation rate of the country has presentation by these.
to be here, and happy to be here also with all the representatives of governments and stakeholders in the area. My name is Gert van der Bijl. I work for Solidaridad in Europe. Have been working for Solidaridad for more than 15 years, involved in working in different sectors. And since 3-4 years, I work almost full-time on the European Deforestation Regulation, EUDR. First focused on trying to influence the European policy to make sure that it will work for smallholders. And since 2 years, I work with colleagues across the globe on implementation of EUDR and make it work in a way that really supports sustainable agriculture. So what I will do with you, I will share some of the things that are being discussed around EUDR, some of the topics that I think are also important for here. I will add a bit of examples from other countries, what they are doing. And before starting that, I want to echo one comment that the representative of the coalition made in the previous presentation. I think it is indeed important to ensure that you comply with the EUDR and that through compliance it will be possible to continue supplying the European market. But in the end, where it is about is to ensure that compliance and EUDR supports the development of sustainable agriculture, that it supports the development towards an agriculture that works without deforestation and towards an agriculture that helps farmers to get a decent income from agriculture. So in the end, that's what it's about. And EUDR should only be an instrument. But yes, you need to comply with it to be able to supply the European market. So what I will do, start with a few words about EUDR itself, assuming that most of you will know more or less what it's about. I will say a few words about support and accompanying measures that the European Union is working on. Then say something about traceability, and then move to a very important and often discussed subject, which is mapping. Can national maps be used for EUDR, or what maps do you use to prove that it's deforestation free? Then say something about property rights. If farmers don't have property rights, are they out for EUDR, and how to deal with farmers that don't have property rights? And then move to two other subjects, declaration in excess, who pays, which is a very hot topic, and then end with some final remarks. I will need to speed up, I realize, to ensure that we have time for questions. So apologies to the translators, and if I'm talking with too much speed, do interrupt me. So thank you. So to the first, some general remarks about EUDR. I think it's important to realize that we are really getting closer. It's only 4 months left. And I do see a lot of stress and nervousness across the globe. Okay, thank you. And activities are heating up everywhere. Companies also in Europe are becoming more stressed. But I also see a lot of positive developments. And to give you one example, a couple of weeks ago, I was in a meeting with the president of the Uganda Coffee Association, and he said literally 1 year ago, all actors in the Uganda coffee sector thought, who the hell do they think they are in Europe? Are they crazy to ask this from us? And he said, well, if we look at what we are working on now, there is a lot of positive energy, and we still have massive challenges to meet the requirements. But it does lead to a lot of cooperation and makes us work together to promote sustainable agriculture. And I hope that this will also be the case here and also stimulate you to make it the case here. There is a lot of discussion, also producing countries asking the European Commission for a delay. Also a lot of companies saying, well, we are not ready yet and it's too complicated. It has to be delayed. I think it's important to realize that so far there is no sign at all that the European Commission is planning to delay the regulation. So I think it is important to be aware that by the end of the year, large companies will need to comply with the regulation, and it will not be postponed. So in very short, what is the regulation about? I think most of you will know. a company that brings a product on the European market that is on the list for EUDR, so that includes coffee, cocoa, and other products as well, the company will need to show geolocations, so show where it comes from, trace that product until the European market, show that it's deforestation free, and you can only show that with maps, and show that it's legal compliant. So that is the overall set of requirements, and it will be checked on the European market by national authorities in each country. I think it's important to stress that it's the company that brings the product on the market that needs to comply. They need to show the geolocations, they need to show that it's deforestation free. So the responsibility is on the company. So whatever you do as a producer, as a government, it needs to be in cooperation with those companies. And those companies need to include all the evidence and requirements in when they bring the product on the market. When they come with a shipload of coffee or cocoa in Europe, they need to upload this information in a IT system. That will go to the customs, and then the customs will check if all the papers are there. And part of those products and papers will be checked if everything is in order and if it's really deforestation free, etc. So that's the overall system. The European Commission has from the start said there will be support for producers, for smallholders to comply with the requirements, but also support to address the root causes of deforestation, which is in a lot of situations poverty. So what the European Union and member states, and the Netherlands plays an important role there, Germany plays an important role there, are doing now is one thing is that they have selected 10 countries that will receive financial support. Peru is one of those. And how that will work out in practice needs to be seen in the future. And the second, they are setting up an information hub for producing countries where you can ask questions and be informed about all the kind of practicalities. That is still under construction, but can also help in the future to support. Then the subject of farm mapping and geolocations. There is a lot of discussion about, is this complicated or not, and how do you actually collect geolocations, and are there local systems? Some countries are now very active in mapping all the farmers to support the companies and provide the information on what is there to those companies. For instance, Uganda is very actively making overall mapping where they bring all the 8.5 million coffee farmers in one system to ensure that these geolocations and this farm information can be available to provide the necessary information for the European market. Other countries are also working on that, and I think it's also good to hear that also here in San Martin there is cooperation to ensure that the information is available. Then the second, that geolocation needs to be transferred through traceability to the point of entrance on the market in Europe. In some countries, they are setting up national systems to trace the products until the export market in, for instance, in Ivory Coast. That can help. And I think also setting up joint systems on traceability here can help. But again, it is important to realize that it's the company that needs to collect the information. So everything that you do on traceability, on geolocation, need to be in cooperation with the companies. And there will be a challenge in some of those countries that are setting up national systems to ensure that they communicate well with what the companies are setting up. Next subject, mapping. There is a lot of discussion, and I think also sometimes a lot of misconceptions about what is asked there and what it will require. if you as a company, again, this is a requirement for the company, want to prove that the product that you buy is deforestation free, you need to have a map of 2020 of how it looked like at that moment, because that's the only way to show that there has been no deforestation after 2020. And then you combine that with the geolocation of where the production is now. So that mapping needs to show that there was already production or no forest in 2020. The European Commission has set up a system using satellite data that provides a map showing how it looked like in 2020, combined with developments in area of production in the different regions. With satellite data, and there is a lot of discussion about the quality of that. And one important thing to add there is what the European Commission has said from the beginning. This mapping is only there to support companies. It doesn't have any legal status, but it's there to support companies for their due diligence systems. So companies can use it, but they are not forced to use it. And I think in the end, everyone realizes that there is no single data satellite set that is really fully reliable. And there comes part of the complexity, which means that in the end, if you really want to have reliable pictures, data of where deforestation has taken place, you need to have additional information. And I think that can also be a challenge, but maybe also opportunity here to ensure that there is good data available of where deforestation has actually taken place, or where exactly was forest in 2020 and where not. And one thing important to realize is that, I'm not an expert, but what I hear from experts is that the satellite data tend to overestimate deforestation, because often in their pictures for 2020, they picture as forest what was at that moment coffee, because it's sometimes very difficult to distinguish the leaves of coffee in a picture with forest. It also tends to overestimate deforestation from smallholders, because smallholders, the small plots that were already used in 2020 for agriculture are sometimes seen as forest on those maps. So that is a risk, but in the end, it's the responsibility of the company to provide the information. And if you here can support companies to improve those data and avoid that production that was already there in 2020 will be seen as forest on the map, I think that can also help smallholders to continue supplying the European market. And one discussion there is also, can national maps be used there? That can, but only if those national maps work with the same definition as the European Commission and the European Union of what is forest. And if they are available for 2020, and in a lot of situations that is a difficulty. So there is, I think, a lot to look into there, but also I think important to see what can be done to avoid that smallholders will, for wrong reasons, be taken out of the market for Europe. I think I covered this one. Then property rights. I've had a lot of discussion with people across the globe, also in my own organization, that say, yeah, farmers don't have formal property rights, and that means that they will be excluded from the European market. One element in legal compliance is indeed land use. But as the European Commission has described it in their frequently asked questions, this requirement for land use does not necessarily mean that all these farmers need to have formal property rights, because a lot of farmers across the globe don't have that. So if they would all be excluded, that would be a disaster. Where it is about is that farmers are in the local situation, according to the local government, allowed to farm and sell their product. If you ask me what does that mean, that is still quite difficult, but it is not necessarily that a farmer needs to have formal legal property rights. If the local government says he is allowed or she is allowed to farm here, that can be seen as legal compliance. Also something I think to work on, discuss with yourself and the government and actors here. When can we say that a farmer is legally allowed to produce? And one specific issue there is also that in quite a number of countries, there are differences between ministries. One ministry has another registration than another ministry, using different definitions. And for instance, in Indonesia, the different ministries are now sitting together to make one system for farm registration and also to use the same definitions. And one thing that is a problem in quite a lot of countries is what is formal on the government maps nature. And to give you one example, in Ivory Coast, something like 30% of all the cocoa is produced in areas that are on the map formally seen as nature. It has been deforested long ago, but those maps are old. And I'm not sure how that will be here and if there will be differences between ministries here. But I think it is important also to discuss that and to ensure that ministries, governments, and also stakeholders work with the same definition and can be clear about what is legal and what not. Yeah, then a very important question is, and often discussed, who is going to pay for all the costs involved? There are different estimates of what the total cost of compliance will be, from 1.3 to sometimes 3-4% of the overall price of a product. There are examples from companies that are now already paying more if they can be sure that their suppliers are EUDR compliant, but that's only a few of them. In Thailand, the Rubber Authority has set up what I find a very interesting example, a weekly auction where cooperatives that have compliant products can offer their products and they are being sold at the auction, which means that their EUDR products get a higher price. And I think in the end, yeah, it is important to ensure that the cost will not be on the plate of farmers, but yeah, if possible, be paid by end producers and consumers, but at least that companies play an important role there and take their responsibility. Then declaration in excess. It was already mentioned, I think, by one of the representatives here. The idea of declaration in excess has been allowed by the European Commission. And to explain that a bit, if you look at the requirements, there should be a correspondence between the product that you bring on the market in Europe and the farmer producer. So as you bring a product on the market in Europe, you need to know where the product comes from, where it has grown, how much, which farmers, and then you are responsible for legal compliance, for zero deforestation, etc. But it is also possible to mix it with other products that are also compliant and well, declare a larger amount of products than what is exactly in the batch that you bring on the market. That can be done at small scale, at larger scale. But the thing is that you then need to be responsible for, if you say you buy or bring on the market 1,000 kilograms of coffee, and you add the geolocations of 10 times as much, because you don't exactly know if that 1,000 is exactly what is in that batch. You need to be responsible for everything that is in there. That is possible, and a lot of companies are already doing that. The difficulty, and also the European Commission has explicitly said that this is possible, it is likely to be used at a lot of places. And JDE Peach, and I think they've also tried to do that here, is doing that now for 10 countries at country level. But in the end, that will mean that if they declare that for a whole country, they need to ensure that all the product in that country will be deforestation free and also will be legally compliant. That is quite a challenge. So that's why the European Commission, they haven't said that they agree or not, but they say, well, maybe it's better to do it at least at a smaller scale. So maybe at a region. So for San Martin, maybe it could be possible. But the importance is that if you do that, each company that then bring the products on the market that is declared in excess will be responsible for all the compliance of the whole region. Quite complicated, and I don't blame you if not everything is clear, but maybe we can further discuss that after. Then I will end with some final remarks. And the second goes back to the speaker from the coalition. In the end, what I think is important is that EUDR will support sustainable agriculture. It is important to comply, but in the end, what it is about is that actors work together to support and promote sustainable agriculture and to ensure that EUDR will be helping that. There is also a lot of discussions, and that's where we have been very active in as Solidaridad, about what does it mean for smallholders. There are some signs that in some regions, companies are saying, well, it will be difficult to buy from smallholders and certainly from unorganized smallholders. I think it is important that we avoid that, because this is not something which is a natural phenomenon. It is something that we can work on together. And I think in the end, as I said, it's important that EUDR is contributing towards sustainable agriculture, and that also means that we need to include smallholders and make it part of a sustainable agricultural future in the region. Thank you. That's what I wanted to share with you.
Please hit. I have a question. What happened to those producers who have stopped for about like 10 years and now they want to look at it, and we see them through the satellite as forests, but how can we look at the evidence?
I will again repeat, first of all, it is a responsibility of the company that brings the product on the market to have a due diligence system and to provide the information about zero deforestation and legal compliance to the European authorities. They are responsible. And if companies just use, let's say, the European satellite data, then there is indeed a risk that they will exclude smallholders, or some of the smallholders that on the map are indicated as forest where they produce for 2020. But they can avoid that, and that will need additional effort. That will need additional effort from them. But also, I think actors here in the region, NGOs, governments, and also companies here can help them to make sure that they have the right information, and by showing information, proof, evidence that that farmer was already producing there by 2020. And yeah, it can be avoided, but it does require additional effort. Yeah, that's the only thing I can say about it. Does that answer your question or concerns? Or okay, yeah, thank you.
Bien, acá y luego la colega.
Welcome, Jenny Mori from the FENIMAC. This is for Fabiola. I think that you have touched a very important point about sustainable finance. You talked about the interest rate, and I have seen your management in many years. And my question is, how can, from the coalition, have you find this balance point to have a competitive rate? Why? Because it's true there are funds that are coming through cooperatives programs. However, in the final phase, we don't find that competitive rate, because at some point I have visited some cacao and coffee producers, and they have asked, what's my benefit for taking care of the forest? I think that financial entities are still very metrical, but I want to know, how can we help achieve that balance point? Thank you. Well, I don't think that there is a lack of possibility to coincide run profitability with a model of having a low rate. I just think that we're only looking at part of the chain, the producer, but we're not trying to articulate the whole chain that can reduce the risk, because when I have talked about the actors from the financial sector, they talk about who, but they want, but they're very afraid, and that fear automatically increases the rates. So if you look at the whole chain, we have that with their cacao in the country, you can already see the buyer with a contract, with a cooperative, with producers, and the whole chain up to the producer. But if I only look at the producer, I'm only looking at a part what gives security to the lender. We should look the whole chain. That's a factor. The second one is, if it's the producer today makes 10 with technical and assistance, maybe he could be producing more, like 30, and that ensures that it's going to be a better payee. So what we have to do is the financial sector sits down with the actors of the whole supply chain. As coalition, we would be happy to facilitate that dialogue so that we can find those common factors that can bring between the government, the producers, and the actors from the financial sector and the market. That balance, I think that it's possible. When I was in agriculture and state, I was talking to the banks because we don't have any differentiated credit for depending on the type of management. If you're a producer, that you are handling something or managing something that has reduced emissions, there is no difference. There you should already have some points of differentiation. So I think there are a lot of possibilities and different parts to achieve that balance. Thank you. Hi, Melissa Maharo from WWF. My question goes to either of you. You have mentioned the case of Thailand, and Fabia, you've mentioned other initiatives that I would like to know if you have better recommendations of better practices at a level of government that can help us be better prepared, that in 4 months we can abide by the rules. Okay, one practice that I believe when I was in front of the Ministry of Agriculture, we faced a a strike, an agricultural strike, and that gave way to have different a dialogue between different sectors of the state. And usually, environmental topics we leave it to environmental, and agricultural topics we leave it to agriculture. But here we have topics that deal with transportation, production, that has to do with a lot of sectors, infrastructure. So I think that it is valuable for the state to call and open dialogue spaces, multi-sector spaces. This is not just a topic that needs to be resolved by the national government. If the national government doesn't work together with the regional government, maybe the national government will have goals of having tools that nobody else will be able to use because everybody else is not prepared to use. It has to be a multi-actor and multi-level. I think those are two things that we should look at. We have 2, 3 questions. There will be a space for more questions later. Help, please.
Now, I want to add a few words to this one and repeat the last remark. The good examples that I see are examples where governments, private sector, and NGOs are working closely together. And government cannot solve these things alone, because in the end, it is the companies that need to comply with the requirements. But they need the government, and they need cooperatives, and they need farmers and NGOs to make it work. And there are countries where there are very good networks and cooperation between these actors. And one thing that I also want to add here is that we had this discussion about maps. One example is Indonesia, where the government is very actively working with the European Commission to use or compare the European maps with their own maps and see how that can be integrated into one map that companies can use that is really accurate and also, let's say, fair to smallholders. And I think that is a very good example, and also something where government officials and the private sector could work together.
Juntos. My question is directed for Gerd. It's a pleasure to see you again in Peru and see the examples that you bring from other countries leading with implementing this regulation so that they don't lose access to markets. I want to share my concern with the topic of how can you read the forestry coverage and the loss. Of course, you talked about different systems and definitions make it more complicated. We have made the analysis of how with the different levels that the European Union has given us, and as Carlos have talked about secondary forests, like forestry systems that have coffee and trees are read as forests under these systems, and I want to know how can we avoid of these producers to lose access of how the coverage is read. Imagine if we convince one of the big businesses that it's not a forest but a system. I want to know how does this happen with the authority of the European Union that does a random check? Has a procedure been defined in which the image reading shows how can they, is there a way that they can pressure, be more precise in how they read it, information from the field. Maybe if like a regional government tells you, hey, that's not a forest, that's an agricultural place. Because for this region, that is something that's concerning here. This is happens like 30% of the agriculture region. I want to know if this has been defined or other countries have worked around this.
Yeah, very good question. And well, let me first of all repeat, it is the responsibility of the company that brings the product on the market to present it with evidence as much as possible that what they bring on the market is not coming from recently deforested land. And they can use the satellite images that the European Commission has presented with the Joint Research Center and Global Forest Watch involved, and I think also they can use other data. How it will exactly be controlled, there are no strict rules there. There is still a lot of guidance expected from the European Commission to come because there are a lot of complexities and issues. But I think it is important to stress that if a company with good information from local entities, that can be governments, can be NGOs, has convincing information, I cannot imagine that a civil servant in the port of Rotterdam that is going to check this then thinks, oh, they say that in San Martin, but I don't believe it. So in the end, it is important to have convincing information. And the more people are involved, the more entities and actors are involved, the more convincing the information will be. And yeah, that's, I think, the only thing that I can say about. There will be no simple procedure and will not be one button that they will press in Rotterdam when checking it, or in Barcelona or whatever, the national authorities, to check if that's right or wrong. So they will depend on what has been provided by the national authorities, by other entities from producing countries. And if that information is convincing, I cannot imagine that they will say it's not true. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah. Okay.
Although the question is not for me, I think one of the things that I see as an opportunity is that if, for example, those areas are identified, we already have to do case studies. And with that case study, and I have that bias of being an attorney, we have to show, as we have to show and prove, is do the procedure. So how would I show, well, in what year am I sure that that area was not covered? Imagine that it's 2015. So I take the image from the satellite in 2015 and I use it. At what year did it start having coverage? 2019. Okay, I get the image from the image from 2019, and I show that it already coverage already existed. The state has a role. They have to define a protocol that either person that's in that situation, especially the private business, has to follow, leaving the responsibility with the business. Is that the business is going to not run the risk, and they're going to choose the producers wisely. That is something that affects directly the small farmers. So I think that we have to have a combination that's very clear of the efforts of the state with that small holder that provides the business that has the tools to show the proof, to avoid errors or different reading from what happened in history. So it's very important to have the analysis in different times. So those that have different images from different years can help make that timeline that allows to have the images for the years that are going to be needed. Good morning. I am Jorge Lazo. Fabiola, in your presentation, you said something very important over the economy, the behavior of the economy, where rational beings, we act more emotionally. And that is a topic in agricultural in the world. But so then in the rational economy, it's black or white. In the behavior, it's gray. In cacao, are we doing gray things to get to the black or white, or are we only focusing on only doing black or white? What's your opinion about this? Thank you, Fabiola. I thought I didn't want his question, but now I know I didn't want this question. Okay. I think that throughout many months, we got stuck in a discussion that made us lose our focus. The reforms that were approved in the Congress were focused on the title and judicial access. As we've mentioned, it's not what solves the problem, because right now we already have that norm, but we haven't resolved the problem. Because the biggest problem is related that we continue deforestation. For example, if today by just magic the deforestation stopped in the Amazon, I think that a little bit would change, maybe a lot, the way in which we are discussing right now how to show how not to be a high risk place. I think our factors would be different, but deforestation hasn't stopped them. Because this hasn't stopped, the risks continue to be, and the evaluation of the risk has to be more detailed and rigorous. If our country continues going up, the trend keeps going up, but we need to make it go down. Until that happens, there will continue to be more things related to try to stop deforestation. And I think that's where we need to understand what are the elements that make people make decisions. Why do people think? And a lot used to say, I want the title, because the risk is that they take away your land. But if they give you the title, does that make it they don't take your land? But if you stop deforestation, wouldn't that help if you put a lock to the topic of changing the use? Because we haven't achieved the goal. How do we generate the correct incentive that, instead of taking away the coverage, wants to put more coverage? I think that's what we need to continue discussing this, because we haven't achieved the framework of the norms don't implement it. We haven't achieved that, and I think that's where all of our efforts have to be focused on that. What really is the button that we have to touch?
Well, to add a few words here, one of the disadvantages of any regulation is that it's always black and white. You comply or you don't comply. And that's the same with certifications. It's always black and white. And progress is not black or white. It comes with steps and with continuous improvement. And that's why I'm also convinced that EUDR may be a small part of the puzzle towards reaching a sustainable agriculture, but it will only be if it's really accompanied with on-the-ground measures, with coalitions in countries that work together to step-by-step improve. And what I want to add here is that one thing that I say in a lot of presentations in Europe about deforestation and about EUDR is that small farmers don't deforest because they hate trees. They deforest because they want to have a future. So in the end, the only way to avoid deforestation is to ensure that we build another model, a different model, to enable farmers to have a future without deforestation. In the end, that's what it's about. And I really think that the work that the coalition is doing is what is needed to complement EUDR, or maybe the other way around. I think the EUDR should complement what coalitions on the ground are doing.
Please, short questions and answers. I would like to know what countries have you seen are already achieving what they have done. I really liked your focus on what you talked about the Philippines, where the government, the country is working together with the European Union how to be compatible and how to have tools that are compatible, which I think is very urgent. Here we work for a long time and we have a lot of platforms. We don't know who to work with, and I think that makes it more complicated. I am Gerardo Medina. I'm a small cacao producer, and do you think it would be possible as Peru to certify the European Union would be able to accept us, because as all the information we have talked from the ministry, only after 2020 about 70 farms have not deforested. So can we change the use of those farms or certify? Do you think that certification could be made? Because with a lot of buyers, a lot of people that I've talked to from different countries, they say that no, maybe the European Union wouldn't accept it.
Well, not an easy question, but maybe that makes it a good question. Well, first of all, what you describe, if there are 70 farmers that have deforested after 2020, and if we take them out, then we can ensure that Peru is deforestation free. That is what JDE, Pete, and Veritas have been doing in, I think, now 9 countries. And I think the question, as I presented, is will the European Commission accept that? They will, in the end, only accept that if you can also ensure that all producers are legally compliant, because that's a second requirement. And that can, I think, more easily be done at a smaller scale, at a region of San Martin. And I had quite a bit of discussions with JDE Peets about this, and they also say, well, maybe we shouldn't do it at national level, but at regional level, and then it's more likely to be accepted. And I really like the approach, because what you then do is indeed avoid that smallholders will be excluded. You really reduce deforestation. And I think if that can be done at a smaller or regional level or maybe local level, and you can indeed ensure that this is in the batch that is going to be bought, because that will then be the challenge, that it will not be mixed with others. I would love that, but that will require exchange with the European Commission to ensure that it will be accepted. So yeah, again, maybe not a full answer to a complicated question, but I hope this helps. Yeah, there are quite a number of countries that say that, oh, they will be fully compliant. But to be honest, I don't know of any example where I'm really convinced that they are already. And there are, I think, examples of companies that are well prepared. And for instance, quite a number of cocoa companies or chocolate companies that buy cocoa in Ghana and Ivory Coast. I think that they will manage to organize this, and they will also manage to organize this in other countries. Overall, I think the cocoa sector is more advanced than the coffee sector. But that doesn't mean that it will work for the full country of Ghana and the full country of Ivory Coast. I think Indonesia is one of the countries that is doing a lot in preparation, certainly in the palm oil sector, and I think they will be one of the first to comply. And I think that is also true for the palm oil sector in quite a number of other countries. But I think I can answer this question better in 1 year from now.
Only one piece of data. If you were interested in getting to know more about the experience of Indonesia and Ivory Coast, we are part of a coalition and we are part of the Governors for Climate and Forest that have several states of Indonesia and Ivory Coast. If you are interested in knowing more about their preparation, we could coordinate maybe a call or a meeting virtually, and they're coming actually in October for the Pukalma meeting. So we could work this month to have some space in October, so we can work. Thank you very much. Well, in this presentation, I'm not going to repeat the regulation. I think it was already mentioned, but I would like to give you a perspective at the level of the country, how the regulation is applied, and to share with you some observations. First of all, as Gert was saying, we will start in January 2025 for the operators, and in June 2025 for the small companies. The information that we have is that we are going to apply this from 2025. There are many questions that were made, but Fabiola and Gert answered many of the concerns that you might have. Into this 4 months before the enforcement of the regulation, I would like to speak of polygons and due diligence by the private sector. A key element that sometimes it's difficult to understand when we talk about due diligence is that the ones that are going to apply the due diligence are the private operators, are the European companies, are them the ones that are going to take the risk. So many of the questions that they have are the companies, European companies, will take the risk of, for example, accepting an excess declaration or not, or applying or doing a risk analysis. The first point, the polygon assessment. You know that in the cocoa and coffee chain, we have 30% of the producers that are in associations and clubs that export with certifications, that produce specialty goods, or that have direct contracts with companies. Some of these producers have raised their polygons and have systems of traceability with private monitoring system, or with companies that are supporting them. The great challenge is to support the producers, the independent producers that work with commodity companies and that go through gatherers or middlemen that are not registered. And it is to them that we will have to support more than everyone, or anyone. I think the answer of the Peruvian state was very innovative, using the registration to support the polygon assessment. And this model, in terms of traceability, and as Gert showed, many of the countries in the world are doing this same type of activity. They're registering farmers. They are included in a database, in a common database, to be able to support them. The registration is a transparent and open system, which is very important to provide confidence, and it has a digital module and an application that is already operational. The challenge is to deploy it in the region so all the coffee and cocoa producers can raise their polygons and show that they do not come from deforested areas. That requires the movement of resources by the government to raise those polygons. In the European Union, we are contributing to that effort in a project that will start in San Martin to raise the polygons. There's some other partners are doing the same in San Martin. We are working with Minagri in coordinating all of those efforts through an executive table of the different initiatives, so everyone shares information. The objective that we have next to the government is to avoid, at the end of the year, that the producers at the last minute request to be registered. So we are working, so this can be done progressively, but there is a risk that the producers in December will ask for their polygons to be raised. So we have, in a progressive manner and in advance, all different projects. We should share information with the registration system. So in the end, the most simple thing is to have a single system. This is something that we will do. We will constitute a single system that will facilitate the work of the economic operators. Another important aspect is to examine traceability seen from the point of view of the private sector. We, as officers from Minagri and European Union, we have seen the different issues for the producers and the different necessities. But in the last months of application, what will be important is to see how companies will have to work to comply with the regulations, and there is a series of elements that we will have to take into account. First, when we speak about risk analysis, that part will remain in the hands of the operator. What is the risk that imports that I'm doing could harm a native community? What is the risk that the imports could be done by the child labor? So that analysis should remain in the hands of the European operators. The second level is the gathering of the data. That part, the economic operators will pass that responsibility into the trading companies that will have to add evidence and legality information or legal information, and the data or the polygons is most possible that it's in hand in the COPs, and for the producers that do not make part of organizations with the middleman, and that will have several implications. For example, it will be essential to facilitate the access to information that is in the producer register registry. We will need an interface, an application that allows to easily to the organization to register producers that are in the registry, and applications that show you where the goods come from, and also to identify other stakeholders, companies, trading companies, and producers, to explain them what we expect from them. Of course, middlemen are the weakest part of the chain that many times are not well identified by the state, but that work with trading companies. In the next months, we'll have to move them in a systemic manner through a communications campaign as the one that we have here. Something very important that we will have to do is to work on the trust around data use and confidentiality, traceability and transparency that we see, and the advantage that we see as a public entities, that we try to develop those systems, and that means for the private sector to have commercial strategic information, and we will need a lot of communication to set that trust and that transparency. In a due diligence system, the proof of evidence is on the responsibility of the private sector. What the public sector must do is to have a enabler that an enabler to access the public information. The operators will have to find information with a certain level of certainty. Public entities have an essential role to work around the legal issues and enablers. Minagri is working on a mapping the main part of the regulation, and Minagri is also working around the due diligence guideline. As Kurt mentioned, Germany and the Netherlands are working with a team to support this new phase of application in the regulation, as in a project called SAFE, and that has a fund of more than €4 million, and that will have a term of 3 years, that will support companies and producers to promote sustainability in value chains of cocoa coffee. Some operators say that they are already complying with the norm, because from this time the first exports will come to Europe and will reach after January 1st, 2025. It's important in this space to multiply the experiences, to see in a concrete manner how the norms are applied. And I think it is container by container that the norm will progressively be applied. In conclusion, I would like to highlight the importance of having a clear framework that will allow balance between the legitimate property rights and the protection of natural areas. We know that the Peruvian state is working on that. Thank you very much.